I was standing at the stove, stirring the last bit of garlic butter into the mashed potatoes, when I heard my daughter laughing behind me. The smell of roast chicken filled the air and I was feeling pretty good about the evening. It had been a long week and I thought we could all use a calm night. Just me, my 9-year-old daughter Layla and my sister Amanda, sitting down for a quiet dinner. Amanda had brought over a bottle of wine, we'd put on some music low in the background and everything felt normal, comfortable. For the first time in a while. We sat down together, the plate still steaming, and for a few minutes everything was just easy. Layla was chatting about her day at school, something about a girl who tried to cut in line at recess, and Amanda was rolling her eyes in a half-amused way, sipping her wine. I passed the chicken, asked Amanda how work was going, and she started complaining about her boss again, the same guy she'd been hating since last year. Then out of nowhere Layla looked up from her peas, smiling that innocent toothy grin she always gets when she thinks she's being helpful, and said, "I found $50,000 in the back of the hallway closet." It took me a full second to process the words. Amanda froze mid-bite. Her fork hovered over the plate, her eyes locked on Layla like she'd just announced she'd built a bomb in the basement. I could feel my stomach drop. I didn't even blink. I looked straight at Amanda and in that exact moment I knew something was wrong. Her hand started to shake just slightly, and then in one sharp movement, the plate slid off her lap and shattered on the hardwood floor. "What did you just say?" I asked Layla, trying to keep my voice calm. She giggled, clearly not understanding the weight of what she'd said. "The closet," she said again, "the one next to the laundry room. There was this old shoebox behind the winter coats. I opened it and it was full of money. I counted it. There were stacks and each one had a little paper band on it. I think it was 50,000. I was frozen. My blood turned to ice in my veins. Because that was the exact amount of money that had disappeared from my job a week ago. I work as an office manager for a private construction company. A small, tight-knit team. Nothing flashy, but we dealt in a lot of cash payments from subcontractors. I remember the panic when we discovered the missing money. There was no break-in. No obvious signs. Everyone had been on edge. The owner, Frank, had kept the situation quiet, not wanting to involve the police yet. But I had access to the storage cabinet where the cash was kept. I had been under quiet suspicion, even if no one had directly accused me. Now my daughter was telling me she found 50 grand in my own closet. Amanda stood up suddenly, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid splashed across the tablecloth. She moved so fast I barely had time to react. She walked over to Layla, grabbed her by the arm and without warning, yanked her up from the chair. Layla shrieked in surprise and Amanda's fingers tangled in her hair. "You little thief," she shouted. "What did you do? You took it, didn't you?" I shot up from my chair so hard it nearly toppled over. "Amanda, let her go," I yelled, rushing toward them. My hands were trembling and I grabbed Amanda's wrist, prying her off my daughter. Layla was crying now, clutching the side of her head where Amanda had pulled her hair. I wrapped my arms around her and pushed Amanda back with my shoulder. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. "She's 9 years old. Why would you say that?" Amanda looked at me with wild eyes, her chest heaving. "She found the money," she said. "She knew where it was. She's lying. He took it. Or someone told her to hide it there." I stared at her, completely dumbfounded. "What are you talking about? Why would Layla hide anything? She didn't even know what she found. She was just being a kid." "She knew what it was," Amanda hissed. "She said the amount. 50,000. That's not a coincidence. That's not something a child guesses." I turned back to Layla, who was still crying, and led her out of the room, heart pounding. I sat her down on the couch and crouched in front of her. "Sweetie," I said as gently as I could manage, "did you really find money in the closet?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I was looking for the Monopoly game," she mumbled. I moved the coats and saw a box. It was heavy. I opened it and it was full of money. I didn't take anything, I swear. I believed her. Every part of me believed her. Layla wasn't capable of a lie that big and she had no reason to hide anything from me. But the question still hung in the air, suffocating me. If the money was in my closet, how the hell did it get there? Amanda followed me into the living room, quieter now but still seething. "You need to explain this," she said. "You told me about the missing money. That was from your job, wasn't it? How does it end up in your closet?" "I don't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I swear to God, Amanda. I don't know how it got there." She didn't answer. Just stared at me, eyes darting between me and Layla. Something was very, very wrong. I wasn't just Layla's mom. Before her, before Sacramento, before I ever knew what it meant to truly be exhausted, I was something else entirely. I was Amanda's mother in everything but name. That part of my life never fully left me, no matter how much time passed. We grew up in a cramped little house just outside of Reno, Nevada. A flat, washed-out neighborhood that always smelled faintly of heat and dust, where broken sprinklers ran down cracked sidewalks, and old pickup trucks sat baking in driveways. Our parents weren't terrible, not in the dramatic kind of way people usually describe. They just weren't present. My dad was a long-haul trucker always gone, and my mom, well, she was the kind of woman who looked at motherhood like a leash she'd never asked to wear. By the time I was 18 they were barely speaking. Fights had turned to cold silences, and then finally one quiet afternoon, they both sat us down and said they were splitting up. No tears. No screaming. Just tired looks and a statement like a final weather report. "Your dad's moving out," my mom said. "It's better this way." Amanda was 11 at the time, just starting middle school, and I remember looking at her across the table and realizing something that hit me like a punch in the gut. There was no one left to take care of her. My mother had already started working nights at a casino by then. She wasn't going to change diapers again, not metaphorically or literally. She clocked out the second she handed us the news. College had been on the horizon. I'd been accepted to a decent state school in Arizona, had my heart set on going, had even bought a second-hand suitcase with dreams of living on campus, but all of that collapsed in a matter of days. There wasn't a sit-down conversation about it. No big dramatic moment. I just didn't go. I stayed. It started small, packing Amanda's lunches, helping her with homework, walking her to school, but it didn't take long before I was the one making every decision. I got a job working nights at a 24-hour grocery store just off the highway, stocking shelves and bagging groceries for the odd 3 a.m. customer. During the day I cooked, cleaned, helped Amanda with projects, kept track of her dentist appointments, tried to soothe her when she had night terrors. I became everything. She'd cry for me when she was sick. She brought home report cards for me to sign. Her teachers called me Mom more than once by accident, and I never corrected them. I never once blamed her. It wasn't her fault our family had fallen apart. She was just a kid. A good kid. Curious, headstrong, and smarter than anyone gave her credit for. She had this fire in her even back then. And I thought that if I just did enough, if I sacrificed enough, she might actually have a shot at something better than what I had. So I pushed myself. I learned how to cook properly. I clipped coupons religiously. I figured out how to stretch a $300 grocery budget into meals that could last us a month. I cleaned houses on weekends to make ends meet. I kept her birthday parties simple but special. Homemade cakes, thrifted decorations, little things I hoped she'd remember fondly. We never talked about the arrangement, Amanda and I. Not really. She didn't ask why I stayed, and I didn't offer. It just became the shape of our lives. She got older, started doing well in school, made friends, went to dances. I watched from the sidelines, proud but exhausted. I didn't date. I barely had time to shower most weeks. My 20s passed in a blur of night shifts and laundry and PTA meetings where everyone else assumed I was a much older sister or a very young single mom. Eventually, when Amanda graduated and got accepted to UC Davis, I cried harder than I'd cried in years. Not because I was sad, because I was relieved. It had all been worth something. He was getting out. He had a future. And for the first time I thought maybe I could start my own life, even if it was a bit later than everyone else. But even as the years passed, that dynamic between us never fully changed. I was still the one who knew what size pants she wore, the one she called when her first boyfriend broke up with her, the one who sent her care packages during finals. She got used to leaning on me. Maybe too used to it. So when I stood in my living room that night watching her accuse my daughter, my actual daughter, of stealing, all I could think about was every sacrifice I had made for her. Every job I took. Every sleepless night. Every time I put her needs ahead of my own. And still she didn't hesitate to turn on us the second things got uncomfortable. It wasn't just the accusation that hurt. It was the betrayal. After everything I'd done, all the years I gave her, she didn't even stop to ask if it was true. She went for Layla like a predator. Like she didn't even know us. And somewhere deep in my chest I felt something splinter. After Amanda left for college and started building a life of her own, I tried to do the same. I was in my late 20s by then, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't have to structure my life around someone else's needs. It was terrifying. I remember walking into my apartment, just a tiny one-bedroom I rented after Amanda moved out, and feeling the silence wrap around me like a heavy blanket. There was no homework on the kitchen table. No sneakers by the door. No one to cook for. I didn't know what to do with that kind of quiet. I threw myself into work. I moved to Sacramento after getting a steady job as an office manager at a small but successful construction firm. The hours were long, but the pay was decent, and for the first time I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I even started dating again, cautiously, like someone testing the temperature of a pool with their toe before jumping in. Most of it led nowhere. Awkward dinners, ghosted texts, the usual. But then I met Greg. Greg wasn't flashy. He worked in tech sales, drove a reliable gray Honda, wore clean sneakers and button-ups with just a hint of cologne. He listened when I talked. He was kind to the waitress. He made me feel like maybe I hadn't missed my chance, like there was still something left for me beyond being someone's older sister or someone's exhausted mom. We moved slowly. At first. After a year together I got pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it didn't feel like a disaster either. We talked, fought, cried, then pulled ourselves together and got married at City Hall on a chilly Tuesday afternoon with no flowers, no guests, just the two of us and a judge in a wrinkled suit. Layla was born the following spring, her lungs strong from the first second, her eyes wide and serious, like she already knew the world wasn't going to make anything easy for her. For a little while everything seemed right. Greg was around. He changed diapers, warmed bottles, sang off-key lullabies that made Layla laugh. He worked from home some days and we'd sit together in the evenings watching TV, exhausted but happy in that blurry way new parents often are. I believed in what we were building. I wanted so badly to believe it. But cracks started to show before our second anniversary. Greg began working later. He took more business trips, started locking his phone, being distant, irritable. I knew the signs. I'd watched our father do the same dance years ago, fading out of the picture one slow inch at a time. I asked questions. He lied. I pushed. He stonewalled. And then one night he just didn't come home. I waited until midnight, then 2, then 4. At 6 a.m. I called his phone and it went straight to voicemail. 2 days later I got a text. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Don't call. That was it. After everything, the wedding, the baby, the quiet promises, we were just gone to him. No explanation, no attempt to fix anything. I lost it for a while. Not just emotionally. Financially too. Layla was still in diapers. Formula was expensive. Daycare was impossible on my salary, so I started bringing her to work with me when I could, hiding her in the back room with an old tablet and noise-canceling headphones. I barely slept. I couldn't keep up with bills. And then Amanda showed up. I didn't ask her to come. She just appeared one afternoon at my door with 2 suitcases and a serious look on her face. She hugged me tight, told me she had taken a leave from her job, said she wasn't going to let me drown alone. And for a while I was relieved. He jumped right in, changing Layla, cooking dinner, folding laundry. She'd always been good at taking control. Felt like having backup in a war zone. But things didn't stay good for long. At first it was little things. A 20 missing from my wallet. An Amazon package I didn't remember ordering. Some Bluetooth speaker I would never use delivered to our address but addressed to no one. Then the utility bill was late. I was sure I'd paid it, but the notice said otherwise. I checked my bank account. The payment had been declined. I started keeping track of everything. Writing it all down. Dates, times, amounts. I didn't want to believe it, but the numbers didn't lie. There were Uber rides charged to my card at 1 in the morning. Bar tabs in neighborhoods I'd never been to. Online purchases for clothes I didn't recognize. Deliveries that always arrived on days I was at work. One night I confronted Amanda. I asked her flat out if she was using my card. She acted offended, even laughed it off at first, told me I was sleep deprived, that maybe I'd bought something and forgotten. But when I showed her the bank statement with her usual coffee shop listed 3 times in a week, her expression changed. She went quiet. Like a switch flipped. She didn't admit anything. Just walked out of the room, left me standing there holding the bill like an idiot. The next day she was back to normal, like nothing had happened. She made pancakes. Kissed Layla on the forehead. Asked me if I wanted to watch a movie later. But I never forgot that moment. The way she looked at me. The way the air shifted between us. Something was wrong. And I had no idea just how deep it would go. I don't remember the exact day Amanda introduced him. I just know it was warm outside because I'd left the front door open for air, and when I walked into the living room with a basket of laundry on my hip, there he was, sitting comfortably on my couch like he'd been there 100 times before. "Melissa, this is Justin," Amanda said, her tone light, casual, but with a certain performative cheer I recognized too well. "He's working on this incredible new tech startup. Like actually something big." Justin stood and extended his hand, smiling wide. He had that kind of charm that comes off a little too polished, like it was rehearsed. White teeth, trimmed beard, perfectly worn jeans, and a Henley shirt that looked expensive without being flashy. He smelled faintly of something expensive and woody. His handshake was firm but not aggressive. I didn't like him. Not from the start. But I smiled politely, shook his hand and said, "Nice to meet you," because that's what I was supposed to do. He was magnetic. I'll give him that. Within an hour, Layla was sitting cross-legged on the rug in front of him while he made a coin disappear and reappear behind her ear. She giggled like he was a wizard. Amanda watched them with a look I hadn't seen on her in years. Adoration, trust, something like infatuation. I stood in the kitchen pretending to scroll my phone, watching the 3 of them through the reflection on the microwave door. Over the next few days he started coming by more often. At first it was with Amanda. Then I'd come home from work and find him already there, helping her cook or fixing something small, tightening a wobbly cabinet hinge, carrying in groceries, checking the battery on the smoke detector. He moved through the house like he lived there. That bothered me more than I let on. It wasn't just his presence, it was the way he asked questions. Subtle, seemingly harmless questions that built into something uncomfortable. One night, while Amanda was upstairs getting Layla into the bath, Justin sat across from me at the kitchen table nursing a beer and asked casually, "So how much do you actually take home after taxes working at that construction firm?" He said it like he was just curious, like maybe he was thinking about a similar job. I answered vaguely, enough to keep the lights on, and gave a tight smile hoping he'd take the hint. But he didn't stop. He asked if we had a joint account or if Amanda and I kept things separate. He asked if I had any savings for Layla's future. He asked if the safe in my bedroom, the one Amanda knew I kept tucked behind the dresser, was fireproof. "Just thinking ahead," he said when I asked why he cared. "If you've got valuables in there, you might want to consider upgrading." I didn't say anything at the time, but I made sure to check the safe that night. Everything was there. A few old documents, Layla's birth certificate, a silver necklace my grandmother gave me, and a little emergency stash, around $800 in cash. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Amanda wouldn't let anyone near my stuff, but the unease sat with me like a bad taste. Meanwhile, Amanda's behavior started shifting too, slowly at first. One evening, we were sitting on the couch after Layla went to bed and Amanda casually said, "Hey, could you spot me $300 until next week? Justin's waiting on a wire transfer from this investor and I covered dinner last night. We're just a little tight." It wasn't like her to ask. I'd been the one covering most of the bills since she moved in, but she never outright asked for money. I hesitated for half a second, then nodded and transferred it to her account. It was fine. Things were tight but we'd get by. But then, a few days later, it was $500. Something about needing to pay off a last-minute ticket for a tech conference in LA. "He's got a pitch scheduled," she said. "This could be huge, Mel. I'm serious. He's meeting people with real money." I gave her the money. Not because I believed in Justin's imaginary startup, but because I saw that glimmer in her eyes again. The same one she had when she got into UC Davis. She was chasing something. A future, a promise, maybe even a version of herself she'd lost along the way. And I didn't want to be the one to take it from her. But the requests didn't stop. A week later, it was $700 for a rental car and hotel deposit because Justin's investor was flying into San Francisco and they needed to meet face to face. I asked questions this time. Where was the investor coming from? What was the name of the company? Did Amanda even see the email confirmations? He brushed it all off. Said I was being negative, that I never supported her the way she supported me. That one stung. I didn't argue. I just gave her the money, then stayed up half the night staring at the ceiling. Something was off. Not just about Justin but about the way Amanda talked around things now. She was evasive, moody, defensive. She started locking her phone when she never used to. He kept her laptop with her at all times, even in the bathroom. We barely spoke unless it was about Layla or the dishes. And still Justin kept showing up. Always smiling. Always helpful. He bought Layla a set of cheap magic tricks from Target, taught her how to shuffle cards like a street performer. She thought he was the coolest person in the world. One night she told me, "I wish he was my dad." I smiled and said nothing, then went into my room and cried quietly so she wouldn't hear me. The thing that kept me up at night wasn't just the money, or Justin's invasive questions, or Amanda's sudden silence. It was the feeling that something larger was shifting under the surface. That my home, my safe place, the one thing I'd managed to rebuild after Greg left, was no longer mine. I just couldn't tell if Amanda didn't see it or if she was part of it. Layla had always been a curious kid. Even when she was still learning to write, she'd follow me around the house asking questions about everything, from how the washing machine worked to why rain smelled different than the garden hose. After Greg left, she became even more observant, like she was trying to make sense of a world that didn't quite play fair. Her favorite shows were always detective dramas and old mystery series with grainy film and dramatic music. I used to laugh when she'd pause an episode and make her own theory about who the killer was before the halfway mark. She had a sharpness about her that didn't always match her age. I thought it was just a phase. I didn't know it would end up saving us. One night, after Amanda and Justin, still parading around like he belonged in our lives, had gone out for a late dinner, I was sitting on the couch folding laundry while Layla fiddled with something on the rug. I didn't pay much attention until she crawled up beside me and whispered, "Can I tell you a secret?" I looked down, smiling. Of course. She held up an old smartphone. It was one of Greg's, a dusty thing I hadn't seen in years. It didn't have a SIM card anymore, but apparently it could still record audio. "I've been spying on them," she said quietly, glancing toward the hallway like someone might be listening. Amanda and Justin. I mean Eric. I froze. Eric. I asked, my voice low but tight. What do you mean? That's his real name, she said. Eric Blake. I looked it up. He left his laptop open one night in the kitchen and I saw a weird email. I googled it. He's in trouble, Mommy. Big trouble. I felt my pulse in my ears. Wait, what do you mean you've been spying? How long? A few weeks, she said, fidgeting with the phone. They talk really loud sometimes and they always go into the laundry room to argue, so I just put the phone in the laundry basket and turned on the recorder. I couldn't speak. I just took the phone gently from her hands and opened the voice memo app. There were several recordings, all labeled with dates and times. I clicked on the most recent one, and as soon as it started playing, my legs went cold beneath me. Justin's voice, no Eric's, was unmistakable. Smooth, relaxed, but tense underneath. You could hear the edge in it. She's got the cash, he said. 50 grand. Sitting in a safe. We take it then figure it out later. I'll fix it, I swear. We just need the money now. Amanda's voice came next, quieter but sharp. I can't steal from Melissa. That's my sister. She raised me. What the hell is wrong with you? There was a long pause, then his voice again. And this time there was no charm in it. No show. Either you help me or those guys come here. You don't understand, Amanda. They're not gonna ask twice. This isn't a game. The recording ended there. My hands were shaking. I looked at Layla, who was watching me like she expected me to be angry or scared or both. I pulled her into my arms and just held her for a long moment. Is that the only one? Finally asked. She shook her head. There's more. Some are boring, but some are really bad. He said stuff about the house. About you. I don't think he likes you. I didn't respond to that. I was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. I went through the other recordings one by one. Some were just them bickering. Amanda accusing him of lying, Eric gaslighting her, telling her she owed him, that everything would work out if she'd just stop panicking. But then there was one that made the air in my lungs freeze completely. Amanda again, frustrated. You promised it was clean. That you left that stuff behind. And him, cold this time, irritated. It's nothing. A few fraud charges. Some misunderstanding in Colorado. Nobody's chasing me. Relax. But she didn't sound relaxed. You said your name was Justin Slade. But I found the mugshot. You're Eric Blake. The pause was heavy. Melissa doesn't need to know, he finally said. You don't want her to take that kid and leave you alone again, do you? After everything she's done for you. That broke something in me. I sat there in the dark, listening to them talk about me like I was a mark. Like I was disposable. And all the pieces clicked. The weird questions. The obsession with the safe. The missing money. Amanda's sudden dependence on me. Eric's smooth lies. The way he played Layla like a toy. And the worst part, Amanda knew. She didn't stop him. She tried maybe. She hesitated. But she didn't stop him. She brought him here. Into our home. Around my daughter. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay awake with Layla curled next to me, the old phone clutched in my hand, the voice of my sister echoing in my head as she whispered, I can't steal from Melissa. But the question that haunted me wasn't whether she could. It was whether she already had. I didn't want to go to San Diego. It was a work conference, 3 days of dull lectures and networking mixers, but I didn't have much of a choice. My company had already covered the hotel and airfare, and my manager made it clear that my attendance was expected. I went because I had to, not because I felt comfortable leaving Layla behind. Amanda had offered to stay with her. She made it sound easy, almost eager. We've got it handled, she'd said with a reassuring smile. Eric and I will take turns watching her. You go do your boring work stuff. I remember hesitating at the airport, my carry-on strap digging into my shoulder, while Layla hugged me tight and Amanda waved from the car. I had a pit in my stomach the entire flight, but I told myself I was overreacting. That Amanda wouldn't do anything reckless while I was gone. That Layla would be safe. That everything would still be in one piece when I got back. I was wrong. The trip blurred together. I sat through panels, smiled at strangers over coffee, nodded through sales pitches. But I checked my phone constantly, texted every night, asked for pictures. Amanda always replied, sometimes even with a selfie of Layla holding up a drawing or brushing her teeth. Nothing ever looked wrong. But something felt wrong. Like I was holding my breath the entire time, waiting for the air to change. I came home on a Thursday night, tired, drained, and ready to sink into my own bed. Amanda had made dinner. Pasta, garlic bread, a salad no one touched. Eric wasn't there. She said he'd stepped out to take a call. Layla was quiet but in a good mood, bouncing in her seat as she told me about school. I forced myself to relax. It was almost normal. Then, somewhere between her second helping of pasta and reaching for her juice, Layla casually said, "Oh, and I found the money again." But it wasn't in the safe this time, it was in the closet under the blankets. The room went still. My fork hung in the air. Amanda froze. Her eyes locked on Layla, and for one brief flickering second, I saw something raw and vicious flash across her face. "What money?" I asked, keeping my voice calm even though I already knew the answer. Layla looked at me, chewing slowly. "The same money from before. The box. But it was moved. It was in the guest room this time." I stood up. Walked down the hall. My heart was hammering in my chest, my legs moving before I'd even thought through what I was doing. I went straight to the guest room, pulled open the closet and dropped to my knees. It was there. The shoebox. The same shoebox I'd used once to store baby photos and old greeting cards, now packed with stacks of cash. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out and set it on the bed. I didn't need to count it. I already knew what I'd find. But I did it anyway. 10 stacks. 5,000 each. $50,000 in neatly bound hundreds. It smelled like paper and plastic in panic. I opened my purse, pulled out the copy of the internal report from my office. The one listing the stolen cash, the serial numbers flagged in the system. I hadn't told Amanda I had it. I'd printed it for my own peace of mind after the money went missing, desperate to have something tangible. I flipped through it now, comparing number by number. They matched. Every single one. It wasn't just cash. It was the cash. I stood there staring down at it, not even hearing Amanda walk in behind me until I felt the air shift. "It's not what you think," she said, voice low, almost pleading. I turned around slowly. She stood in the doorway, eyes flicking between the box and my face. "Where did you get this?" I asked, my voice quiet, but there was no softness in it. She didn't answer. Just took one slow step into the room. "You stole it," I said. "From my office." "No, Melissa," she started. But before she could finish, Layla came into the hallway behind her, barefoot and curious. "Mommy, what's going on?" Amanda turned to her like a switch flipped. Her face twisted, panic rising in her voice. "Why did you say anything?" she snapped. "Why do you always talk so much?" I moved fast, stepping between them, but Amanda lunged forward, grabbing Layla by the arm and yanking her so hard she stumbled. Layla screamed. It wasn't the cry of a bumped knee or a bruised elbow. It was fear. Real, sharp, instinctive fear. "Let her go," I shouted, grabbing Amanda's wrist and twisting it away. He fought me harder than I expected. Her nails caught my arm, her breath coming out in short, angry bursts. "You don't understand," she hissed. "You think this is about you? You don't know what he's done. What they'll do if we don't." "I don't care," I said through clenched teeth, dragging her back as Layla scrambled behind me. "You crossed a line. You hurt my daughter. She was never supposed to know." Amanda screamed. "She was just a stupid little girl, she heard too much." That was the moment something inside me snapped. Years of resentment. Of being the one who raised her. Protected her. Sacrificed for her. And this was what it came to, her turning on the only thing that ever truly mattered to me. I backed her toward the wall, every muscle in my body ready to fight if I had to. My voice was cold and steady. "Get out of this house. Melissa. Now." She looked at me, her face flushed and wild, and for the first time in my life I didn't see my sister. I saw someone else entirely. Someone desperate. Someone who had already decided I was just another obstacle. She turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I heard the front door open, then shut hard. Silence followed. I pulled Layla into my arms and held her there on the floor, both of us shaking. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing for sure. We weren't safe anymore. And this wasn't over. I didn't wait until morning. As soon as Amanda was out of the house, I locked every door, double-checked every window and called the police. My hands were still trembling as I explained everything to the dispatcher. The stolen money, the recordings, the threats, my daughter being grabbed, all of it. My voice cracked halfway through the call, but I didn't stop. I couldn't afford to hesitate anymore. Within 20 minutes, there were 2 patrol cars outside the house, lights flashing silently against the front windows. Layla sat beside me on the living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, her little hands clenched tightly around the old phone like it was some kind of lifeline. When the officers came in, I handed them everything. The cash. The printed serial numbers. The phone with the audio files. They took one look at the list and the money and radioed for backup. Detectives arrived shortly after. I repeated my story again, this time in more detail. One of them, a woman in plain clothes with tired eyes, asked to speak to Layla. I hesitated for a second, but Layla sat up and said, "It's okay, Mommy. I remember everything." Her voice was quiet but steady. Braver than I'd ever heard it. They took her statement separately, gently, in the dining room with the door half open. I watched from the couch as she told them about the recordings, about Eric's real name, about the email she saw and the strange things Amanda had said when she thought no one was listening. She was clear, careful, and heartbreakingly calm. When she finished, the detective patted her hand and said, "You just helped a lot of people." It was almost dawn when Amanda came back. She didn't even knock. Just walked in like nothing had happened, her keys jangling as she tossed them onto the entry table. I was standing near the stairs, the officers positioned quietly in the kitchen and hallway waiting. When she saw me, she paused. "What now?" she said, tired, annoyed. "You're still mad? I didn't touch the money. It's still there." "You didn't have to," I said, and then stepped aside as two officers moved forward. Amanda's face twisted in confusion for a split second, and then the realization hit her. "Wait, what is this? You called the police? Melissa? Are you serious?" They read her rights while she cursed at me, tried to pull away, screamed something about betrayal and loyalty. It didn't matter. They cuffed her and led her outside. Her voice echoed in the hallway until the front door slammed shut behind her. But Eric was another story. He showed up 15 minutes later in that same smug, easy stride, carrying a bag of fast food and humming to himself like it was just another day. He barely made it through the threshold before he saw the badge. His eyes locked on the detective standing near the staircase, and I saw his instinct click into place. Run. He turned to bolt, but I was already at the front door. I shoved it closed with my full weight, hand on the deadbolt, blocking his way. "You're not going anywhere," I said, and my voice didn't even shake. He lunged anyway, trying to push past me, but two officers grabbed him from behind, throwing him to the floor hard enough to knock the food out of his hands. The bag burst open, fries scattering across the tile like shrapnel. They cuffed him, ignoring his protests. "It's a mistake," he kept shouting. "I didn't do anything. This is insane." But they had enough. Once they got his ID, it was over. Eric Blake. Wanted in Nevada, Oregon, Arizona. Fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, financial coercion. His face matched the mugshots in the system. Slightly older now, but still unmistakable. He had a record that read like a textbook. Romance cons, fake businesses. Manipulating women into opening joint accounts, taking out loans, laundering money. There were at least 3 open cases already pending. Mine would just be one more. Back at the station, the evidence we gave them all lined up. Layla's recordings showed clear proof of intent. The stolen money with serial numbers matched my employer's loss report exactly. One of the officers told me later that Eric had a fake name, fake social security number, and a burner phone filled with messages to someone listed only as M. She wasn't just helping him. He knew. Maybe not from the start, maybe not all of it, but enough. Enough to get caught. When I told my boss about the recovered money, he was speechless. I returned every dollar untouched. He cleared my name without hesitation and said the company would handle the rest legally. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Layla became something of a quiet hero in all of it. The police called her statement instrumental. The DA said her recordings were cleaner than anything they'd been able to get on Eric before. They asked me if I'd be comfortable allowing her testimony in court, even via video. I said yes. And she agreed without blinking. "I just wanted to help," she said one night as we sat on her bed, the weight of everything still hanging in the air. "You did," I told her. "More than you know." And I meant it. She had done what none of us could. She saw through the lie, and instead of being afraid, she acted. She protected me even when I thought I was the one protecting her. The house was quiet after they were gone. Empty, but not in a bad way. Not in the way it used to be. There was peace again. No missing money. No fake names. No one pretending to love us just to take what they wanted. It was finally over. Detective Karen Rose called me in on a gray Tuesday morning. I remember it was raining lightly, that kind of soft drizzle that turns everything a little quieter. I'd already dropped Layla at school and was halfway through a lukewarm coffee when the call came. She didn't say much, just that she had something to show me and asked if I could come down to the station. When I arrived, she was waiting in one of the back conference rooms. The walls were covered in whiteboards and folders, printouts clipped in neat rows, lines drawn in red marker between names and dates. It looked like something out of a crime show, and for a second I felt completely out of place, like I didn't belong there. But then Karen looked up and gave me that familiar, steady nod. She didn't waste time. "We pulled something interesting," she said, gesturing for me to sit. She opened her laptop and turned the screen toward me. It was a login record. My name. My work credentials. The timestamp was during the second morning of my trip to San Diego, right in the middle of a mandatory workshop I couldn't have possibly left. It showed a full session inside our secure system. Someone had logged in with my credentials, accessed financial documents, employee files, even my supervisor's private notes folder. My breath caught. But how? I started. Karen clicked again and pulled up the IP address from the login. It was traced to your home Wi-Fi, she said. Whoever used your login did it from inside your house. Not through a VPN. Not masked. They were lazy or maybe just desperate. I felt my throat go dry. Do you know what device might have been used? I asked. She nodded slowly. We think it was Amanda's laptop. We recovered it during the warrant search. Forensics just finished analyzing the drive. It was wiped at some point but not thoroughly. We pulled fragments of session data, browser logs, and even auto-filled credentials, yours. I leaned back in my chair stunned. It was one thing to know the money had been stolen. To know she had been part of something awful. But this was methodical. Planned. Done behind my back in my own home, while I was out trying to hold together what was left of my job and my life. Did she confess? I asked quietly. Karen looked at me for a long second, then nodded. She cracked during the second interview. Said it all started as a favor for Eric. That he was panicking about some debt some people he owed. He told her there was cash sitting in the company, said no one would even notice if a little bit went missing. Then he started threatening her. Said if she didn't help they'd come for her or worse, for Layla. I swallowed hard. She said he found out things about her past. Old debts. That time she almost got fired from the mortgage company years ago. Used it all against her. Told her she was lucky to have a sister like you. That you owed her. Karen's voice was calm, clinical, but I could feel the weight behind every word. She broke into your account using autofill from a shared browser session. That was the first access. Once she was in, she pulled the cash movement reports, knew exactly what days money would be dropped off and stored. Eric handled the physical part. He handled the rest. It was deliberate. I sat there motionless, staring at my own name on that screen. The same login I used every day. The same system I'd always trusted. My house had become the staging ground for a crime I was nearly blamed for. She said she didn't want to do it, Karen continued. But she also said, and I quote, Melissa always had everything. She had her life together. She was the responsible one. The favorite. And I was just the mess she had to clean up after. The room went quiet. I could still hear Amanda's voice in my head. Younger. Softer. Laughing in the backseat of my old Corolla after soccer practice. Crying on her first night in the dorm when I dropped her off with a plastic bin full of clean towels and ramen noodles. Asking me to braid her hair before job interviews because she said it gave her confidence. Now she was sitting in a cell and I was sitting in a police station hearing how much she had resented me for all of it. She admitted she took the money, Karen said. That she knew it was stolen. She tried to frame it like she was caught in a trap. That she didn't know what else to do. Do you believe her? I asked. Karen looked at me for a long second. I believe she was scared. But I also believe she made her choices. This wasn't one mistake. This was a chain of them. She had chances to stop. She didn't take them. I left the station in a haze. I drove around the neighborhood for almost an hour before I went home. I didn't want Layla to see me like that. Heavy, hollow, quiet in a way that felt permanent. I kept thinking about that one sentence. Melissa always had everything. I wanted to scream. Everything? What did she think everything looked like? Did she forget who took her to school, who gave up college, who wiped her tears at 2 a.m? I had nothing when I was 18 except a little sister who needed me. And I gave her everything I had. And she took what was left. The trial lasted longer than I ever imagined it would. What I thought might be a few intense weeks stretched into months of hearings, depositions, continuances, and procedural delays that wore everyone down. Every time I thought we were close to the end, another motion would be filed, another witness would be added, another expert brought in. I kept going because I had to. For Layla, for myself, for the part of me that needed the truth to be said out loud in a courtroom under oath, where no one could deny it anymore. Eric Blake, or Justin Slade, or whatever other names he'd used over the years, was the main event. The prosecutors painted the picture clearly. A career fraudster, a manipulator who moved from woman to woman like a virus, finding their soft spots, exploiting their fears, gaining their trust just long enough to access their finances. There were victims from Arizona and Oregon who testified remotely. One was a teacher who emptied her savings for him. Another, a divorced mother of 3 who sold her car when he promised a return on a fake crypto startup. He used charm like a weapon and vanished before the fallout hit. The evidence from my case sealed it. Layla's recordings. Amanda's laptop. The cache with serial numbers. The login trail. The courtroom was silent when they played the audio clip of him saying, "She's got the cash. We take it then figure it out later." And when Amanda's voice trembled in the background saying, "I can't steal from Melissa," the jury's expressions changed. They weren't just listening to a theft anymore. They were listening to betrayal, layered, deliberate, and personal. Eric was sentenced first. 10 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 7. 3 states had pending charges, But California went first because the evidence here was airtight. The judge called him a textbook predator, someone who weaponized intimacy, and had no regard for the emotional or financial devastation left in his wake. When they let him out in handcuffs, he glanced over his shoulder just once, looking for Amanda. But she never looked back. Her sentencing came later. Her role had been murkier. An accomplice, yes, but not the mastermind. She hadn't stolen the money directly, hadn't created the frauds herself, but she had facilitated them. He had used my home, my computer, my name. And she had done it knowing full well it could destroy my life. The court acknowledged the manipulation she had suffered, the emotional leverage Eric had used, but it didn't absolve her. She was sentenced to 2 years in a minimum security facility in Texas. Not prison exactly, but not freedom either. 3 additional years were tacked on as conditional supervised release. She was also ordered to pay restitution, every cent of the $50,000 that had been stolen and then some. Legal fees, damages, the full sum added up to a number that she would never realistically repay. Amanda lost everything. Her apartment lease was terminated shortly after her arrest. Her landlord, once friendly, removed all her things before the second hearing. She didn't fight it. There was nothing worth saving. Her employer officially dismissed her, and her name, once respected in her field, was blacklisted locally. Friends she'd known for years stopped returning her calls. The ones who did speak her name did so in hushed, bitter tones. In our small part of Sacramento, her story traveled fast. She became the cautionary tale. Parents warned their kids not to trust too easily. Employers ran extra background checks. Amanda Gray became synonymous with failure, with betrayal, with the kind of deep, shameful fall that doesn't get a second act. I didn't visit her during the trial. I sat through every hearing, every cross-examination, every cold look from the defense table. But I never looked her in the eyes unless I had to. I couldn't. Every time I did, I saw not just what she had done but who I used to be for her. The person who gave up everything so she could have a shot. And she used that trust as a weapon. Layla somehow came through all of it stronger. We kept her involvement limited after her statements were recorded, but the weight of what she'd done, what she'd seen, never fully left her. I found her one night on the porch, sitting in the dark, holding that same old phone. When I asked if she was okay, she said, "I just wanted to remember that I was right. That it really happened." It did. All of it. There's no real sense of victory in any of this. The money was returned. My name was cleared. The criminals were held accountable. But the losses were quieter. A bond shattered. Years of trust dissolved. A family broken in a way that no sentence could repair. The courtroom emptied. The doors closed. And when it was all over, I stepped outside into the cool air, knowing I'd never get back the version of life I once believed in. But at least finally I knew the truth. All of it. Returning to work after everything that happened felt surreal at first. The office was the same. Same humming lights, same squeaky rolling chairs, same whiteboard with half-erased to-do lists. But I wasn't the same person walking back through that door. I thought people would look at me differently, that maybe the whisper of accusations still lingered in the air. But instead they welcomed me quietly, respectfully. My supervisor brought me coffee that first morning. No questions. No awkward stares. Just quiet support and space to breathe. A few weeks later I was promoted. It wasn't something I asked for. I had assumed after the ordeal, I'd need to rebuild trust or slowly earn my way back up. But apparently my name had been cleared more thoroughly than I realized. Karen Rose had contacted my employer during the final stretch of the investigation to confirm that I had not only returned the stolen money but had also been instrumental in the recovery process. They saw me not just as someone who endured a crisis, but someone who helped resolve it. So, I became the new senior IT operations manager. My old office was moved to a bigger one with a door that actually closed, and I was given the responsibility of overseeing 3 junior analysts, 2 system admins, and a network lead. For the first time in years, I had a seat at the table. Not just as the person who kept things running, but someone whose opinion shaped how we moved forward. Still, there were bills to catch up on. The restitution process had frozen a lot of Amanda's assets, but it didn't bring back what was lost from Layla's college savings. I knew I wouldn't rest easy until that fund was back where it belonged. So I picked up freelance work, late-night coding projects, network upgrades for small businesses, a bit of cybersecurity consulting for a friend's startup in Oakland. I worked weekends, gave up evenings, and drank too much coffee. But slowly the numbers climbed again. I kept a separate account this time. A clean ledger. Layla's future was going to be protected, no matter what it cost me now. Layla had her own healing to do. She started waking up at night, sometimes crying, sometimes completely silent, just standing in the hallway with wide eyes like she was trying to figure out if we were safe. It broke something in me every time I saw her like that. No child should carry the weight of betrayal, especially not when it came from people they trusted. The school counselor, Mrs. Hendricks, stepped in early. I didn't even have to ask. One morning after drop-off, she pulled me aside gently and said, "I think we should talk about giving Layla some support. She's strong, but this kind of thing, it lingers." Twice a week they met in a quiet room next to the library. Art therapy, gentle conversations, sometimes even just building puzzles together in silence. I never asked what they talked about. Layla told me bits and pieces when she was ready. "We talked about trust today," she said once, her fingers busy with a Rubik's Cube. "About how it's like a rope. You can tie it back together after it breaks, but the knot's always there." I wrote that down. I still think about it. One afternoon in May, she came home bursting with excitement. She'd entered a school-wide competition called Young Coders of Tomorrow, hosted by the district's STEM department. I hadn't even known she'd submitted anything. Apparently, she'd built a small computer game during her free time in the school lab, something called Code to Escape, a puzzle-adventure game about solving encrypted riddles to unlock doors and free trapped characters. She won first place. They gave her a certificate, a new tablet, and a spot in a summer tech camp hosted by the university downtown. I watched her climb on stage to accept her award, her little hands shaking slightly, but her eyes bright and fierce. She spotted me in the audience and smiled. Not just a shy smile, but one that said she believed in herself again. I hadn't seen that in a long time. I cried on the drive home. Not the kind of tears that come from sadness or exhaustion. The kind that comes from relief. From hope. For the first time in years, I let myself think about building something for myself. Not just working to survive, but creating something of my own. I started sketching ideas on napkins in old notebooks, even in the margins of Layla's homework when she wasn't looking. Little product diagrams. Mock-ups. Concepts for a cloud-based IT security tool for small businesses. Simple, affordable, accessible. The kind of thing people like me could have used years ago. I hadn't dared to dream like that since before Amanda came back into my life. But now, with her gone and the dust finally settling, the space was there. I wasn't just holding things together anymore. I was imagining what came next. And I wasn't doing it alone. Layla sat beside me most evenings, headphones on, working on her own code or sketching out ideas for her next game. We didn't talk about Amanda. Not much. The court letters still came, the occasional legal update about restitution or parole status. I read them quietly, then filed them away. We didn't need reminders. What we needed was forward motion. And we finally had it. Piece by piece we were rebuilding, not just the money or the house or the routines, but the trust, the stability, the belief that life could be more than surviving the next blow. That we could shape something new. Something entirely ours. The letter came in a plain white envelope with no return address, postmarked from somewhere near Houston. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, slanted, a little rushed like always. I didn't open it right away. I stood at the kitchen counter holding it between my fingers for a long time, just staring at my name written in that familiar script. My chest tightened and I felt that old pressure building behind my ribs, the one I thought I'd put to rest months ago. I knew it was coming eventually. A letter. An apology. Some plea for closure, for forgiveness, for something that would smooth over the wreckage. I set the envelope down unopened and walked away. It sat there on the corner of the table for 3 days before I finally took it out back to the fire pit after Layla went to bed. I didn't read a single word. I lit a match, held it to the edge and watched the paper curl and blacken until nothing was left but ash and smoke. I told myself that was the last time Amanda's voice would enter this house. A few weeks later I filed for a restraining order. It wasn't dramatic. No courtroom drama. Just paperwork. A protective order filed with the court clerk that made it clear. No contact. Not directly, not through letters, not through third parties. Nothing. I had talked it over with a family attorney who specialized in post-conviction boundaries. She didn't push me one way or the other, just laid out the options. In the end, I did it not out of anger but protection. Amanda might have been my sister, but Layla was my daughter. And the only thing she needed from Amanda now was distance. The court granted the order without delay. The judge didn't need convincing. The case file alone made it clear that any contact would only reopen wounds that hadn't fully healed. Amanda would be notified by her halfway house supervisor, and if she violated the order, she'd be back in court, possibly back in custody. After that, things settled into a rhythm again. Work stayed busy. Freelance contracts continued. Layla adjusted to her summer coding camp with a confidence I hadn't seen in her before. And I began little by little to feel like we weren't just recovering, we were rebuilding. But once a month, like clockwork, a small deposit hits my checking account. Usually something like $23.67. Sometimes less. One month it was $6 even. Labeled, Restitution, Amanda Gray. The first time it arrived I felt physically sick. The idea that a few crumpled dollars deducted from a prison commissary account were supposed to somehow balance out the years I gave her, the trust she crushed, the safety she shattered, it was laughable. Or maybe just sad. But over time I came to understand what that money really was. It wasn't compensation. Not in any meaningful sense. It was a reminder. A monthly echo of everything she chose to destroy. A permanent thread tying her to the damage she caused. I stopped touching it. I opened a separate account, let it accumulate there untouched. Not because I hoped it would grow into something useful, but because I wanted the proof. A paper trail. The receipts for every broken promise. I've been forced to reevaluate a lot about myself since all of this ended. For most of my life I believed that family came first. That being loyal meant showing up no matter what. That if you loved someone enough, sacrificed enough, you could keep them from falling apart. But Amanda taught me something else. Something harder. Trust isn't inherited. It's earned. And once it's broken, no amount of blood or history can put it back the same way. So now I live with boundaries. Clear, firm, sometimes painful ones. I don't respond to messages from people who once disappeared when I needed them. I don't explain my decisions to those who think biology entitles them to space in my life. I don't forgive on command. Especially not when the wounds are still healing. Layla knows what happened. Not all the adult details, but enough to understand that sometimes the people you love the most can also hurt you the deepest. We talk about it when she needs to. Not often. Just enough to keep the truth from getting buried under time and silence. She asked me once, "Will Aunt Amanda ever come back?" I didn't lie. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "She won't." And she nodded. Not sad. Just quiet. Thoughtful. Like she was filing it away as one of those hard truths life teaches you early. She went back to her game and I sat there beside her, wondering what kind of woman she'll grow into now that she's seen what happens when trust is broken, and what it means to protect your peace. Some days I miss the sister I thought I had. The girl who danced barefoot in the kitchen when we were both too tired to sleep. The one who used to cry into my shoulder and call me her hero. But that girl is gone. Or maybe she was never real. And I've stopped waiting for her to come back. It was late October, one of those rare Sacramento evenings when the air finally cools down just enough to feel like fall. The street food fair had set up on the east side of Fremont Park, and the smell of grilled meat, sweet chili sauces, and hot cinnamon filled the space between the food trucks. Paper lanterns floated overhead on long wires, and a local jazz trio played softly from a small stage near the fountain. Layla and I sat on a picnic blanket near the edge of the field, our shoes kicked off, our plates covered in whatever we couldn't resist trying. Korean fried chicken, fried pickles, deep-fried Oreos, 2 giant lemonades we could barely finish. She was in that perfect age between child and something more. Still light on her feet, still delighted by small things, but sharp in a way that caught me off guard. I watched her as she chased a group of fireflies beyond the edge of the food stalls, her laugh rising into the dusk, her arms stretched wide like she could catch the whole world in her hands. For a moment I was back in Reno, barefoot on a summer night, chasing the same kind of flickering light with Amanda beside me. We'd run so fast through the yard behind our old house that we'd both fall, breathless, laughing, coated in grass stains and mosquito bites. She used to swear she could catch fireflies in her hair. That memory hit like a quiet ache, sweet, distant, and permanently altered by everything that came after. But this night belonged to Layla. I leaned back on my elbows, listening to the music, letting the comfort of the moment settle into my chest. It had been almost a full year since everything happened. The trial. The questions. The letters. The silence. And through it all, Layla had grown taller, more confident, more herself. She had scars now, not visible but real. And so did I. But they didn't define her. They shaped her. Gave her depth. And she wore that strength like armor. She came running back toward me, her cheeks pink from the cool air, her curls bouncing as she dropped onto the blanket beside me with a sigh. "Mom," she said between breaths, "next time something disappears in our house." I looked at her, smiling. "Yeah. I'm checking the closet first." She grinned, big and unbothered, and I laughed until I had to wipe tears from the corners of my eyes. She leaned against me and I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. Around us, other families ate, laughed, danced. Strangers offered us warm smiles in passing. No one knew our story, and for once it didn't matter. We weren't the family from the news anymore. We were just 2 people sitting on a blanket under string lights, watching the sky turn purple. That night, watching Layla stretch out and gaze up at the first few stars, I understood something that had taken me too long to learn. Family isn't about DNA. It isn't about the people who share your name or your history. It's about the ones who choose to show up every day even when it's hard. It's about actions that match words. It's about safety, consistency, truth, and trust. Trust isn't automatic. It's not some inherited right passed down like heirloom jewelry. Something earned. Preserved. Protected. Layla knew that now. I saw it in the way she carried herself, in the quiet strength behind her humor. She would grow up knowing how to draw her own lines, how to recognize what was real and what was just another performance in borrowed clothes. She would be better than all of us. Because she already understood what took me decades to learn. We finished the night with a second round of lemonade and a shared funnel cake that we couldn't finish. We walked back to the car with sticky fingers and full hearts, her hand wrapped tightly around mine. The stars were bright above the city and I didn't look back. Not once.